All right, so welcome everyone. It's so great to have you today. My name is Catherine Swinney and I'm one of the Kent and Medway Healthy Workplaces coordinator today. And we are delivering our Best Me in 45 Men's Health webinar with our guest speaker, Richard Turner from Employees Health. Just as a little bit of housekeeping for today. So if you're wondering where this webinar is coming from, so your organization is taking part in our Kent and Medway Healthy Workplaces program. And part of the offer is that we are a workplace wellbeing scheme delivered by KCC and Medway Council. So some of the support we provide is things like these webinars for today. So while we're recording this session, we make sure for the sake of the audio, if you can leave your sort of microphones on mute, that will just really help. But we do still want to encourage a lot of sort of interaction. So do feel free to sort of share any comments or questions in the chat as we go along today. Feel free to take notes. You will get a copy of the slide deck from today, and you will get a link to this recording as well as some extra resources within sort of 24 hours after the session has ended. So just as a little bit of an overview of what we're going to try to cover in the next sort of 40-ish minutes is we'll sort of do some quick introductions from our guest speaker, Richard. But really what we want to try to aim to do today is aim to answer some of your questions, which is sort of what health conditions, both physical and mental, are men most at risk for? And then once we know that, what can we sort of do about it? So what are sort of things we can do to look after our physical health? What are things we can do to improve our mental health? We're going to look at some top tips on kind of how to make those changes then from a sort of behavior change point of view. And then also address sort of how we can support others, because I know there was sort of quite a few in our registrations come through who are interested in that. And then again, we'll highlight any sort of additional resources or sort of support that's happening in your area as well. So if you haven't already, it'd be great to sort of, if you're comfortable, to share your name and kind of what organization you're joining us from today. And I'll go ahead and pass it over to our guest speaker, Richard.
Good morning. Thanks. Looking forward to this. Hope everybody's well. So yeah, just a quick introduction to me. I'm founder of Employees Health. Employees Health is a workplace wellbeing company, help people thrive, look after their wellbeing, improve the habits they have every day. A little bit more about me and background is I've got a degree in sports science. I've been a personal trainer for 8-9 years, helping people on a one-to-one level improve their health and well-being. And then moved into the workplace 4 or 5 years ago. My background obviously is in physical health and well-being, educating people on how to live healthy and well-being, healthy and happier. But as you can tell from the photos, I'm a hockey loving sports enthusiast and a mental health advocate, and always trying to increase the awareness around poor mental health and how we can look after ourselves and others. And one of the things you might be able to see, I might just bring this down, is I am rocking the Mo for Movember. And I hope everybody knows about Movember, but it's a great charity which helps support men's health as an overall. But we'll look at a bit more kind of the bits they do later on. The other thing to note is I'm not in control of the slides. And some of the other bits, some of the bits we've added into here, I might get some support from Catherine on just to make sure it's in line with everything else you guys have learned in the last slides or the last workshops. So can we move on to the next slide, please? So a little bit about the statistics. Some of you might be aware of this, but it's good to understand why this topic here in this workshop is so important. So 75%, so that's 3/4 of suicides are male. Men aged between 40 and 49 have the highest rates of suicide. I'm not sure if this statistic's on there, but I think suicide is the biggest killer of young men under 30, I believe. 2/3 of men are overweight or obese. 75% of premature deaths from heart disease are male. Middle-aged men are twice as likely to have diabetes as women, who die before the age, 1 in 5 die before the age of 65. And you see, like, I can keep going with all these, but you can see these here. The other thing which contributes to this is men are more likely to have unhealthy habits, which lead to these issues: smoking, eating, drinking, using alcohol as a release, gambling, high risk of social isolation, and all of this plays a big impact on these mental health statistics you can see above. So some of the bits we're going to look at today, we'll begin to look at kind of the differences in how we can look after our physical health, our mental health, and then just some bits we can do to support ourselves and others. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. So we'll look at looking after our physical health first. And obviously, as you can imagine, trying to cover all of these different elements within, I've got about 20 to 25 minutes is going to be a bit of a challenge. So it's going to be quite brief, but here are some tips in how we can look after our physical health. And there's 8 of them. So just to start with, let's give yourself permission to take a break when life's hectic. Giving us some me time is important. Attend health screenings. And there's a list there for you: eye, dental, NHS checks, age-based screenings, gender-based screenings, stop smoking and minimize alcohol intake. That could combine with eating well. The daily allowance on alcohol is 14 units per week for men and women. But I always challenge people to think about the actual why they are consuming alcohol and how they feel afterwards as well, and are we using that to make ourselves to lose less stress? And if we are, can we find a better habit or better stress relief? And then there's being active. The NHS and the government prescribe to 150 minutes of moderate activity, 2 days of strength training, and then minimize periods of inactivity throughout the day. So getting up, getting outside, all these things have good impacts on us. Scheduling appointments with our health professionals, know your family history, understand what issues you might be linked to, I guess, and then self-check regularly. And I think we'll go into that bit next, I believe. So some information about self-checks. Obviously, there are some areas here where we can look after ourselves and how we can begin just to check for those kind of key early signs. So as we kind of looked at within our statistics, there's a few cancers which we have to be careful of, and this is the first one, testicular cancer, the one we're going to check first. Most common cancer diagnosed in males aged between 15 to 44. It's important to look out for any signs. And here are some things, right? Check regularly to look out for lumps on one side, increased size, hardness or pain, and heaviness. You can also sign up to the Movember, and that will give you some more statistics, more signs, and more support with that. But if you do find anything, obviously the first thing we need to do is then reach out to your health professional to see how we can get support with that. The quicker and earlier we find these, and the quicker and earlier we do something about it, the less risk we're going to be at. The next one, please. And then there's prostate cancer, most commonly diagnosed cancer in males aged 45 years and over. And it's the most common cancer in men overall. Some things to look out for: difficulty starting to urinate or emptying your bladder, a weak flow when you urinate, feeling that your bladder is not emptied properly, dribbling urine after you finish urinating, needing to urinate more than normal, sudden need to urinate. You may sometimes leak urine before you get to the toilet, back pain, hip pain, pain in the pelvis. Some things you just might not notice, but it might be the start of these signs. So obviously just keep an eye out for those. Next one, please. And then skin cancers. I think this is the third, Catherine, you told me, this is the third most common sign, common cancers in men. So another thing for us to look out for. So yeah, follow the A, B, C, D, and G rule. And if, yeah, so astrometry. I haven't said that terribly. Being dyslexic, have to give me a bit of a break. Borders, color, diameter, elevation, and growing. So just keep an eye out for your moles. Keep an eye out to see if there's any kind of changes in how they look and appear. And then if you do find anything, same with all of these, do find anything, as I said earlier, the quicker we can get to our health professionals to get the support we need, the better it's going to be. Okay, looking after our mental health. Obviously, as we discussed within the health statistics, mental health within men is an increasing problem an issue, and which something we are obviously very important, very looking to support. But this is the mental health continuum. And the thing with mental health is we all have it, but we all have it on different levels at different points in our lives. And the fact is that 1 in 4 people suffer with mental health issues every year, shows that actually it's not just you're going to have mental health, and if that's you're going to have it, that you're going to have it. We actually all have it at some point. And we're on this sliding scale between being in crisis and having kind of be feeling very anxious, very, very low mood, all the way up to excelling, where a cheerful, joyful, energetic performance with high performance. And so it's been able to understand what puts us into thriving and excelling. And this leads us to a question which I want you guys to answer in the chat or to open up on your mics. What things do you do to keep yourself in the thriving and excelling zones? Catherine, I actually can't see the chat at all. So if you get any answers, please let me know.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye on it. Yeah, so if anyone does want to sort of just share, it could be things that you do or sort of habits that you have that you feel like just sort of tend to help you sort of be in that sort of good headspace. We've got someone's put in the chat being active. Yeah, that's a really good one. Someone else put keeping fit. Yeah, so definitely those sorts of things. I think personally myself, I know I do better when I've got a good night's sleep. That definitely sort of helps me sort of stay on track. Someone else has put meeting up with friends. Yeah, so definitely, again, we saw kind of at the beginning of that infographic that, in general, men are more at risk for kind of being more lonely, more socially isolated. So having those good, strong, social networks is so valuable. Someone else has put exercising, going for a run. Someone else has put listening to music, eating well. Oh, I like that one. Someone else has put not worrying about the things that they can't control. So worry about the things that you can control at the appropriate time, not at 2 a.m. So very good, very good message there to those that have put that. Someone else has put playing football, working out regularly, talking often, really advocate for talking therapies. Yeah, these are amazing sort of contributions. And thanks so much for everyone that's sort of put them in there.
Thank you. Yeah, so that kind of leads us on to kind of the recommendations for how we can look after our own mental health, right? And there's 2 models which we'll look at. And the first one is the 5 ways of well-being, which I think a majority of you have kind of checked in on. But there's a couple of bits here which are extra. So obviously being active is the one which I think's come up most regular within that chat group. Whether that's playing sport, going to the gym, just getting outside and being active. The second one is taking notice. That's kind of being present. It's not kind of, it is being present, just being aware of what's going on around you. And then when you look at a lot of the different supports around mental health, that's a big part of it. The CBT is actually just being aware, being able to reflect and think about our emotions and our thoughts, and taking our mind away from that as well. Then obviously we look at keep learning. And that doesn't have just to be in qualifications. That could be through reading. It could be through new hobbies. Could be through maybe making new dishes, new foods, new exercises, anything really. But the act of learning has shown to be a real big impact on our mental health and our well-being overall. And then something we've already spoken about already on the chat was connecting. So building great relationships where you're feeling supported, being part of something bigger than just your small friendship groups. It could be your work environment, it could be a community, it could be sports teams. And then give. There's a lot of research behind the power of giving and a random acts of kindness. And then I think one tip I would have on this is actually being able to reflect on that, actually being able to think about the acts of kindness you do, because it kind of brings back that positive thought processes. And then the second model is the APPS or APPS model, which is a bit of a new one for me, which Catherine's introduced me to. But it's very much around setting kind of goals around these areas. But Catherine, I might actually just let you elaborate on this one a bit more.
Yeah, so really, we wanted to introduce these two different models that complement each other very well because again, we're all individuals. You might have different learning styles or different preferences. So the apps, if you love a checklist, if you're quite linear in sort of your sort of thought patterns, then you might really subscribe to apps. So apps is again this acronym of kind of looking at your day and your week and thinking, right, what have I sort of done that's make me feel accomplished or feel like I've achieved something, ideally outside of work. It can be also sort of thinking about, what have I done this week that's gotten me active, gotten me sort of physically active. The next one is sort of thinking about what's something that I've done that just gives me personal enjoyment or personal pleasure from. So that could be, watching the World Cup. It could be, playing a certain video game you like, reading, having a certain hobby that you like to do. And then S, that's social. So what have I done to sort of be connected to those around me, whether that's within work, within my family, maybe it's having sort of intentional quality family time on the weekend or after dinner, or, just sending that text to your mate just to say, hey, how's it going? How's it been since I've last seen you type of thing. So it really, as you see, complements the 5 ways of well-being, but they're just two slightly different models to sort of give you two different sort of perspectives for how you might want to think about how you can look after your mental well-being.
Thank you, Catherine. Yeah, and as I said, I think these are obviously bits you've kind of covered before within different workshops, so it's good to have those kind of continuous reminders. And it's an interesting one how they obviously both combine together and how actually it's being able to reflect, but also plan for those bits as well. So being able to plan to have something you can achieve, you can be physical, you can have personal achievement, as well as being able to put input social interaction, stuff like that. So it's great. So next slide, please.
Yeah, I was just going to mention someone's just put in the chat a really good point that sometimes, it can be really hard to sort of, think about doing some of these actions, right? Especially if you maybe have low mood or actually have sort of depression, which can make it sort of, a bit more of a challenge. And the reason I was just going to add with both of these sort of models is that they're very subjective. So maybe you're achievable for 1 week for apps is you've run a marathon, right? But then maybe the second week, maybe you're having quite a full-on week at work. So maybe your achievable is just I got out of bed and I made a dinner that night. So it is quite subjective. So you can sort of take the elements that work with you within your week and within sort of your health conditions that you may have, but still do sort of smaller big things that kind of keep you going and keep your mental resilience up.
Yeah, no, you got a good point there. It's very subjective, and it kind of leads us to these building habits, right? Start small, but then also start with something which you can achieve. So yeah, just quickly before we kind of go into the next bit about some other areas of supporting ourselves, we all obviously come up with challenges, and depending on where you're at, there building habits it can be quite tough. So here is just some tips to help you build some healthy habits to support your health and well-being. And so you're going to start with starting small and make the habit as small as possible if it's something which you're struggling with. That might be, okay, I'm actually struggling to be more active or get to the gym. So my smallest habit for that is actually just putting my trainers in a place where I can put my trainers on. Or whether it's to do with your nutrition, okay, well, let's just start with writing down what foods I'm going to eat this week. So having a plan rather than trying to lose or track calories and understand proteins, it's actually just making it as easy as possible. And then from there, build up gradually. Then obviously find enjoyment from the hobbies or the habits you're trying to build. Although some habits unfortunately might not be that enjoyable to start with, but some of them will be really important to do. So try and make it enjoyable. So what can you do? So if it is activity you're trying to improve, but you don't like going to the gym, but going outside and going for a half an hour walk with a friend is a hell of a lot more enjoyable. There's more laughter, then you can get up and do that. Find support, find accountability, whether that's with friends, trying to find a gym buddy or walking buddy, or a diet buddy. You might want to then reach out to the health professionals, get a personal trainer, go to group classes, wherever it might be, trying to find that accountability and support. Having deadlines, putting goals to it, having targets to reach can be really motivating. Just don't make those too big because they will be too large and will get a bit bit worried about doing those, and also the same process, don't make them too easy, because then we don't feel motivated to do it either. Really link back to your why, what your purpose and meaning is behind why you're doing this, and try to understand that. There's a tip I use for that, is try to question why 5 times. And so, look, I want to lose weight. Why? Because I would feel healthier. Why? Because of if I feel healthier, I will become healthier, but more active and perform better. Why? Etc. Etc. Okay, so it just really defines that why. There will never be a perfect time. So remember, sometimes something's better than none. Next slide. So obviously, we can talk about building habits, and we can talk about doing all these great things to improve our health, but sometimes that doesn't happen. Another question to go into the chat bar or chat section. Why do you think we don't always do the things that can improve our physical and mental health?
Yeah, so feel free to sort of, if you've got any sort of ideas, either for yourself or just in general, that you think make it difficult. This could be either, be practical things like maybe time, or sort of lack of access maybe, or it could be more sort of mindsets as well. So maybe sort of the lack of energy. We've got some things coming through the chat now, which is great. So we've got time pressures, previous injuries, kind of getting just stuck in a rut, stuck into a routine, time constraints, depression. It's easier not to change. So again, sort of approaching maybe those mindsets that might make it trickier or maybe quite unhelpful to trying to make changes. We've got time pressure again. So time definitely seems to be sort of the most common, and then sort of motivation issues. Yeah, so definitely, I think you guys hit quite the common sort of barriers. Definitely. Oh, you're on mute, Richard.
Oh, yeah, someone put me on mute. So yeah, as you said, I think the most common one is time, and it's the most common thing we see most of the time as well when I'm speaking to people. And this, I think this links back to our whys. I think if we find that why behind we're trying to do something, you'll put it first. And you'll begin to process that first. And a tip for this is actually when we're looking to plan our weeks, plan our days, try to process and plan for yourself first, and then squeeze everything else in around you. Because ultimately, if you're not looking after yourself, not looking after your well-being, and not prioritizing yourself first, then you're not going to achieve the things you want to in the outside bits. And ultimately, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything else, right? You don't work as well. You might not even be able to work, etc., etc. And then what was the second one? Finances, did you say?
We could do finances.
Yeah, I can't remember what the second most common bit was. So yeah, for finances, being able to find free resources or cheap resources, learning about things can be quite a good way. Looking for staff discounts within your company, and trying to budget as well and understand where the ins and outs are going. And then we look at lack of knowledge. So yeah, being able to learn, try and find things which we can kind of learn about what we're trying to achieve, check out additional resources, doing these workshops, which are great to learn more from, attend different training things through work, through LinkedIn, wherever it might be, try to find those resources to help you learn more. Lack of access, sorry. Being able to review virtual resources, low cost equipment. It goes back to just trying to find a way and trying to get rid of some of these barriers and maybe potentially excuses, actually trying to figure out the best plan of action, an action which you can do for yourself. And then we'll talk about fear. Fear, I think, fear is like an underlying issue for a lot of health issues, whether that's mental health and physical health. It's the fear of being judged, fear of failing, wherever it might be. Being able to overcome that fear and try to link back to our why is really important. Lack of support. So trying to communicate, find places where you can get that support, whether that's colleagues, friends, family, and speak to them about what you're trying to achieve, why you're trying to achieve it, and they will support you. And if they don't, then would you class them as a friend? And do you need them on your kind of in your corner as such? Lack of energy. building healthy routines, creating good habits, and then lack of motivation. Finding accountability. These all kind of link, some of these stuff links together, right? And when we look to the 5 ways of well-being, all of this stuff can kind of find ways in which we can support ourselves. But sometimes you need to action something before we create motivation. And so it's a big argument between, does the motivation come first or does the action come first? And so being able to sometimes when we're not feeling motivated and we are feeling down, we actually sometimes just need to do the action, but sometimes we need the motivation to do the action. So it's being able to figure out what comes first for you in that moment, and that will change. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm a big believer in there's 2 elements to health and well-being, and that's the action and then the motivation behind the action. For me, that's our mindsets versus our behaviors. And I would normally cover this in a lot more detail, but I'm just going to cover it quite briefly. But we'll start with mindsets, because if we don't start with our mindsets, some of these behaviors won't happen. Okay, and some of the mindset stuff we'll talk about have big impacts on our mental health and our well-being as an overall. And actually, when you do the research on the impact of our mind and our thoughts, on our physical health as well as just our mental health, it's quite outstanding. So being able to switch our mind to positive mindset is great. But I'm just going to talk about growth mindset versus a fixed mindset to start with. And so there's a big belief, and there's two camps, and I think this is slowly changing as the awareness and knowledge is being presented to more and more people. But you can either be somebody which has a growth mindset and looks at challenges, actions or issues or things that happen to you in a way in which it can be an opportunity to grow or an opportunity to learn from, and that's a growth mindset. And a mindset like that's more an optimistic mindset, where we can actually learn from our mistakes, learn from these challenges, and actually improve going forward. We also want to look at my growth mindset as being more optimistic. And actually, people who are more optimistic have higher levels of hope, more risk taking, better relationships. Look at life through rose-tinted glasses, and maybe actually don't look so negatively on the outlook of life, versus somebody with a fixed mindset, and actually their actions basically make up what their worth is. So if you fail at something, it's the limit of your abilities, rather than actually I failed at something, I can learn from that. And so you can see the importance of just switching that mindset to a position where actually I can always learn to do something, and hopefully that might help your motivation to achieve some of these behaviors. But I normally go into a little bit more detail around optimal, like the optimistic element of this, and how optimists will look at different actions a bit differently. But you can see the importance of mindsets when it comes to our well-being. So let's move on to the behaviors for me. And so I have 3 core non-negotiable behaviors. And that is exercise or activity, or physical activity, sleep, and gratitude. I'm going to go into these in a little bit more detail for you, so you can understand kind of the role they play and what we can do about it to support our well-being. So sleep for me is the foundation. It's the foundation we build our house on. And if you imagine our house as our physical health, well-being, and mood in general, it's the thing that it can support that. And I think Catherine said this earlier on. Sleep is that element for her, where if she doesn't get enough sleep, doesn't feel motivated, doesn't feel in high energetic mood, probably doesn't feel that happy. And so if we don't start on this, don't put the foundation into this, like, we're not going to build this house of positive well-being. And what sleep does, it has a huge impact and a huge effect on tons of different elements of our life and our well-being. And that's obviously our mindsets, the way we look at stuff, mood, performance, our health. And that comes down to our immune system, digestive, cardiovascular. It's also massively linked to what's it called? Dementia. But also it impacts our appearance, our interactions with our people, our appetite, our memory. And there's not many people I speak to and I ask if they don't get the 8 hours sleep, walk away and say, actually, yeah, I feel kind of bright and breezy today. They usually feel, I know I feel a bit tired, I feel a bit lethargic. And so you can see that very, very obvious effect on not getting enough sleep. But it's not only about time, it's not only about the quantity of sleep you get, it's also about the quality. And we can create better quality by implementing good sleep hygiene. And this is what we'll talk about now. What can we do? If I've given you 5 tips, first off, there are other tips and pieces, but just 5 simple ones for you to maybe take 1 or 2 away and improve on. The first one, put down your phone 1 hour before bed, and that's for 2 reasons. Getting rid of the negative media, which you're probably looking at scrolling through social media, but then also the unnatural light you're looking at through the screen. Both of those have an impact on both processing and switching the brain off, but also in producing melatonin, which is our sleep hormone. Reduce caffeine intake after 3 to 4 p.m, which also caffeine is a big blocker for melatonin and doesn't help us get ready for sleep. Give yourself enough sleep time. Actually, don't go to bed at 12 when you have to be up at 5. Actually, you need to be going to bed at 9 to get that 8 hours sleep. Create a routine around that. So if you know you're going to be working, going to be up at 5 o'clock every morning, making sure that actually your routine is focused around that time, so you don't wake up tired, unmotivated. And then prioritize, understand the effects and why it's going to make a big impact on your health and well-being if you don't look after sleep, and link it to your why and what you're trying to achieve. And then into our physical activity. Activity in general is our feel-good activity, right? And wherever we do, whether that's going for a walk, playing sport, going to the gym, doing different hobbies, anything which increases our heart rate, gets our body moving, makes us feel good, makes us feel better afterwards. And it has benefits both to our mind and body. The releasing hormones, and it increases our feel-good factor, improves our mind, happiness, and self-confidence, which are huge elements and huge roles on our mental health. They also build strong bodies, joints, muscles, organs. There's so much research behind the effects of both sleep and activity on the longevity of our bodies, but as well as our health. People who are more active live longer, but not only live longer, but live better for longer as well. And this is where the importance of strength training comes into longevity. The more we are doing something to improve our strength of our joints and muscles, the longer our bodies will hold out for, and the better our health will be for longer as well. It fights against diseases and health risks. But what can we do? This kind of goes back to understanding our habits. Okay, yeah, and understanding the things which we can do to create habits or actions, and that's kind of understanding our why, making it easy, optimize your visual reminders. As I said, putting shoes by the front door or putting the gym bag in your front seat when you're going off to work, wherever that might be. Doing something doesn't need to be massive. Doing a 15-minute walk in the sunlight could be the best thing you could do if that's all you can achieve. Find something you enjoy. Kind of all very much links back to our building habits. And then the last one, the one which people probably overlook, is gratitude. And I probably was the same, to be fair. 2021, I started gratitude, and it was probably one of the best things I've ever done for my health and well-being. And why? It's because if we look at the positives in life, we look at what's been good, what's going to be good, what I'm grateful for, and how do I implement that in my day-to-day life. And it kind of shuts off the negative. Negative thought is 4 to 7 times more powerful. We recognize and listen to more negative thought. The media in the world is more negative. So actually being able to look at the positives throughout our day and have a chance to reflect on what's going on is really good for our mind as well as our health, because it makes us create more actions. But there's a few obviously whys here. Reduces anxiety, depression, and stress. Scientifically reduces anxiety, depression, and stress. Increases positive thoughts, reminds us of our purpose and meaning, reflects on the positives, and builds really good positive relationships. What can we do? How can we implement this into our day-to-day life? Here, I'll give you four tips. First one, or 4 ways of doing gratitude. First one, daily journaling, having a journal, one like this maybe, where you open it up and in the morning you write down what you're grateful for. You write down 3 things which you're grateful for, and then maybe in the afternoon looking down and looking at the positives in life. You could do a gratitude letter, what an example I put on the screen here, where you focus that gratitude and that gratefulness to somebody. I am grateful to Catherine for asking me to do this workshop today, give me the opportunity to speak to different people, and it's very kind that she thought that I was good enough to do this talk, for example, right? And not only does that make me feel more grateful for what we're doing, but also it impacts Catherine's mood by me being grateful for her, and actually has a role on both people. Then directed gratitude, having a focused area of gratitude towards maybe your health, and you talk about some of the good things, and having a bunch of questions which helps you direct that gratitude to something. And then the last one isn't so much gratitude, but it's just that idea of being the what's it called? What was it? Taking notice we had on the 5 ways of well-being, just being present, being in the moment, being able to switch off and understand actually how lucky we are to be a human organism in this world of this complex position we are in, and just taking the time to be more grateful of everything around us. Next slide. And then we're going to go, so we just kind of discussed the things we can do for ourselves. We're now going to look at some of the bits we can do for others and how we can support others. And the first thing we're going to try and do, and this is not just for others, this is actually just for the environment, is just tackling stigma. Be aware of the models that encourage us to look after our mental health. The 5 ways of well-being, the apps, the stuff we have just gone through, growth mindset and the non-negotiables. Share real life examples of people living with mental health issues. Promote key mental health messages. And identify if you need additional mental health training, and listen to support others and mental health concerns. Anything you want to add to that one, Catherine?
Yeah, well, I'll just mention as a sort of FYI again, so if you're attending today, it means your organization is taking part in our Healthy Workplaces program. And as we mentioned, this is part of a wider well-being scheme that your organization access, which includes a small number of free mental health training spaces towards our Connect 5 mental health awareness training, as well as our mental health first aid training. So if you are interested in accessing additional training, then just speak to sort of your well-being contact at your organization for more information, and then we can liaise that with you. And the additional resources, we've also highlighted some free suicide prevention awareness training. So again, while this isn't exclusively about suicide prevention, it does highlight things you can access. And some of the sort of techniques we're covering today, like the 5 ways of well-being, and the next slide in just a minute, stem from Connect 5 and other things. So it's just a bit more of an overview here, but we'll give you some more information later.
There you go. Thank you. I thought it was a good one just to jump in on there. So yeah, here's a couple of other tips in helping you support others. And so we've got 2 different models which you can take away and use when you're trying to engage with somebody who might be suffering or you think could need just that help. And this is, first off, is the bathe model. I think it's an anagram. I always get confused between the different names for these things, but I think it's an anagram. It's just looking at the backgrounds, how have things been since the last year, what's going on in life, how's things, just like your opening conversation. How's life, how's things going, what's going on? And if they feel like they want to open up, you'll recognize that. And then how does that make you feel? And then have the conversation as conversation flows. Then look at the T, which is troubles. What troubles you most about the situation? And then look at the H, which is handle. How are you handling it? So it's all very personal to them, and giving them the tools to go off and look after it a little bit better, manage that situation, talk about that situation. And then empathy. That must be very difficult for you. I can see how it upsets you, your reaction. So it's how you respond to each of those kind of questions. So it's a really good, useful supporting others kind of anagram, which you can take away and kind of use. The next one's from November, isn't it? I think we got that one from November, which is ALEC, which is kind of along the lines as the bathe model, but it stands for ask, listen, encourage, and Michelle's gonna be really upset because we changed that, didn't we, on the last bit, the encourage. It's encourage action, and then see, check in. If you've done the mental health first aid course, this is kind of a shorter version of that. Being able to ask questions, listen non-judgmentally, encourage an action, whether that's signposting towards somewhere or personal action they can take, and then check in to make sure they're not just not doing anything. And then wrap up, and this is where I'm going to leave it to Catherine. Thank you guys for joining and listening to me mumble along. I hope you've taken something away from me, from what I've said. And if you want to chat to me, just reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Oh, that's amazing, Richard. Thank you so much. I think there's been some really valuable, tips that, we could really take away from both your personal experience, but then the wider ones that you've got by supporting so many other people. So as we get towards the end, I'm just going to quickly try to share the satisfaction survey link with yourselves. Again, this is a brand new topic for us, so we would really value any sort of feedback that you have, so we can continue to improve on it. So I've just put that in the chat and you can sort of click on it. It won't take you very long, but we've covered a lot today. So just very briefly, in general, when we sort of look to address, what are the health conditions that men are more at risk for? Well, for physical health, there are certain cancers like prostate, bowel, lung, and skin cancers that you're more at risk for, more likely to develop diabetes, cardiovascular disease, dying prematurely, and engaging in unhealthy lifestyle habits, which we talked about. Also, the majority of suicides are from males, and yet men make up just a small minority, just about a third of all NHS talking therapy referrals. So those are statistics that are very grim, and we want to do something about it to make those changes. And that's where Richard talked about, from a physical health perspective, being active, eating well, cutting down on alcohol, quitting smoking if you do, and attending those health screenings, and doing regular self-checks is really, really important for your physical health. When it comes to mental health, practicing these sort of models, whether that's 5 ways of well-being or apps, the 3 non-negotiable behaviors, your mindset, all will help improve your mental health. And then also from a wider community perspective, looking at how we can tackle that stigma, and practice these 2 different techniques to having a well-being conversation with a friend, family, or coworker, whether that's bathe or whether that's the prompts from Alex. But what we'd love for you to put in the chat just now as we're wrapping up is just think about one thing from today's session that you can start to do. And then very briefly, again, I don't expect you to read every single slide here. You will get a copy of the slide deck so you can peruse the resources and all the hyperlinks at your leisure, but just some quick ones to highlight. So we've got all the sort of self-checking information there. NHS Health Checks, that's one of the health screenings that we really encourage you to access. It's a free 45-minute appointment for anyone between 40 and 74. You normally get it done every 5 years from your GP, but you can also get it done at community clinic locations throughout Kent and Medway. And then we've got sort of the support services for Kent and Medway for all the different sort of topics here. If you feel like there's just one sort of well-being topic that you want to focus in on today, then again, this slide deck will help you. If maybe physical activity is where you want to focus, making changes, then we've highlighted Everyday Active Kent, which is sort of a range of different activity finders. But you can also set up your own activity challenges at work with the Active Kent and Medway. If you want to find a free park run, then you can do that. And then for any men in Kent or Medway, there is a groups football clubs called Man versus Fat. It's for anyone who's looking to sort of have a bit of fun, who is overweight. There's certain thresholds that you'll need to meet, but it's free and fun. And then some other ones just to highlight. So when it comes to mental health, so again, we've got suicide prevention training. There's a 20-minute module that's open to anyone and it's online. And then there's a 3.5-hour module that Mid-Kent Mind has got some funding for all Kent and Medway residents. The next trainings are happening December 14th and January 18th. There's also sort of Men in Shed projects in Kent and Medway. There's a dad's charity that helps sort of men with family separation support groups or male domestic abuse support. And again, we've highlighted some other mental well-being support. So if you just want some general information around mental health, then the NHS Every Mind Matters is really helpful. And they've got a mind plan quiz where it's just 5 simple questions, and then they'll give you personalized support around what you can do. And then as we saw, so talking therapy referrals are traditionally quite low uptake in men. So to try to access those, you can access them by referring yourself or getting a GP referral, either way. And that link there shows you all the different 8 talking therapy services in the region. And you can choose, you don't have to do the one that's in your area. You can choose anyone in the area now. So if you want to sort of attend, if you work in Canterbury but live in Medway, you can access one in Canterbury now. If you want just everything sort of that we've talked about today kind of packaged up into a helpful guide, then there's this free men MOT guide from Men's Health Forum that you can access. And then Release the Pressure is a crisis line. So again, we want to try to improve those numbers and the lives impacted by suicide. So if you feel, if you or anyone you know is sort of really at a crisis point, then anyone in Kenton Medway can access this 24/7, 365 days a year by texting or calling Kenter Medway. So again, if you're able to sort of click that satisfaction survey link that we've included in the chat now, or you scan the QR code, then you can sort of fill that out. We really value that because again, this is a new topic for us. We want to improve. But also if you want to sort of get in contact with our guest speaker, Richard, if you have any sort of follow-up questions, then I've got his contact details there. And then stay tuned for our next sort of Best Me in 45 series. So we'll be sort of ramping back up again sort of mid to late January with a brand new topic. So if you fill out the satisfaction survey with sort of tips that you'd like or any sort of topics you'd like to see in the future, then please let us know and we'll be announcing that most likely in sort of December time so that you can register in time for January. I know we've got a few sort of questions in the chat. So someone's put, I'm 57, I've never had an NHS health check with my GP. So yes, so you should be eligible then. But again, there are certain health conditions. So if you're already being monitored for a health condition, then that might make you ineligible. But all of the sort of contact details and how to determine if you're eligible or not are hyperlinked in the links in the slide. And then someone else has put, are any of those mental health resources suitable for late teenage males? Yeah, so the NHS Every Mind Matters on, if I just go back here, the NHS Every Mind Matters and the Mind Plan is eligible to anyone to access. Release the Pressure again, access to anyone, but we can, in the follow-up email today, I can sort of point you in the direction to sort of like young adult focused and sort of adolescent focused resources in the email, but technically anyone can access that. The NHS talking therapies, the eligibility criteria is if you're 17 and a half, so it depends on how old they are at 17, then they can access the NHS talking therapies as well. Thank you again. If you have any sort of follow-up questions, then we'll stick around for the next couple minutes. But I will go ahead and sort of stop the recording now. But thank you all so much for attending today. You've been fantastic. Thank you again.